Hi guys. If you came to see me at Statfold, you'd have seen this in the display cabinet. And even then I might have been too busy to explain. So, this is the brand new, possibly not actually out at this point, Westcliff Works model of Midlander, in current day form. It comes with all the details attached, and is designed for the ARU 4017 chassis. It's a little Japanese motor bogie. And without giving too much away, it's not the only thing designed for it that's due to be released from them. And this little guy will be driving Midlander today. It's the Modelli shunter man, who loves spending his days leaning out of doors. If you're familiar with Midlander, you'll appreciate how small this loco is, and it's common for the driver to stand up outside the cab. So that's the look we're going for here. Hopefully it'll work out when the roof's attached. The print actually needs no extra detailing, but will inevitably have some print lines. I got away with just the usual one across the side, so not much to tidy up. For this I use modelling filler, to fill the model. When it's dry, this can be sanded back flush with the panels. Very fine wet and dry is perfect for this. You just need to be careful not to sand away any fine details like the window trim, as it's so thin it wouldn't take much to disappear forever. The model's about ready to paint, so I'm adding a little handle to aid the spraying. And yes, it's another cotton bud. I'm going in with a classic grey primer. This acts as a good base for acrylic paints to key onto. The green for this livery is an odd one. It looks so different in pretty much every photo that you ever look up, so I was at a loss what to use. Nothing in my collection really looked that suitable, so I went down to my local supplier of Humbrol acrylics and picked one at random. Luckily, I managed to choose the one that looked pretty good, so that was nice for me. The airbrush was used to get a nice smooth coat across the model. Super fine in fact, so none of the intricate details were lost. The green, being acrylic, was dry within minutes, but I gave a couple of hours before proceeding. But it was time to mask the green off in preparation for the black coat. Tamiya masking tape is very high quality, so doesn't really harm the model, nor let paint seep underneath. The black is my usual Miniature Paints black primer, and it's important to use a paint that hasn't been thinned down too much here, as the frames on Midlander have some indents and difficult to reach areas, and if the paint's not thick enough, it'll pool away from these areas, giving an uneven coat. The chassis hardly needs any work at all. Well, none in fact. I just simply paint the wheel faces black so they're less obvious as the thing's running. With the masking still on the body, I can now add a little bit more as I need to work on the buffer beams. The extra masking will now protect the freshly applied black. Red oxide primer is now applied to the buffer beams, as this provides an ideal base for the top coat. Said top coat is the same red as the one used on the coaches. I did this intentionally to try and bring a familiar look to all the stock. With the red dry and the masking tape off, I can now push on with the hand painted details. Again, there's not really a huge amount to work on as it's only a little ditty diesel, but the buffers need to be black. The grills need to be black as well, but these were more of a pain to paint than I was expecting. They're set back inside the body, so it makes it a little bit tricky to get a tidy job of it. Well, that and the massive camera between the model and my eyes. That didn't help. On top, there's just the exhaust to paint up. Oh, and the lights to shine up. I also got lucky with the interior on this one, as whilst it's cream up top like the other stock, the bottom half is body coloured. So luckily I don't need to start jabbing the paintbrush down into it and around all those lovely cab details. To paint up the cream, I started by masking off to aid getting a clean break between that and the green, and then applied white primer. I'm putting it on fairly thick here, seems to be okay. And then I did a good thick coat with light antique white, which helps dull down the white primer as it's quite bright. And also not cream. The details can then be painted up. Again, they're only really basic here, just a bit of gunmetal over the shiny parts. And that'll be all dirtied up later. You can also see how well the masking tape worked around that cream. Try doing that without masking tape. Coming outside of the cab, and we have a nice little step. It is quite okay in black from above, but it does need a little yellow trim around the edge. Okay, well this one seems a tad bright. Bah, I'm sure the black wash will see to that. Lining time. And it's the same process as the other locos. The only difference this time is that I don't need a black border. And that made me question how I'm going to go around doing this safely without the 3-coloured lining. The answer was cold. I had to do it with single colour. I hope it comes out just how fine this lining really is. It's applied in the same way, with the surface getting a coat of decal fix, whilst the transfers soak in water to release them from the backing. And I need a cocktail stick to adjust their position. The corners are a similar method as well. I found a shade of white that matched the lining pretty well, and added a little round blob to the corners. The idea here is to try and get them all a similar size and shape, which is something I need to work on. And unlike Tom Rolt that I did the other week, where I used black on the corners, Midlander needs the colour to match the insides of the panels as well. So the same paint was used. It looks a tad lumpy here, but being acrylic, it'll dry to a much finer finish as the vehicle evaporates. Vehicle being a term for the part of the paint that carries the pigment. I don't mean the diesel, though that is drying. The model then gets a good coat of satin varnish to seal in all that lining. The reason that it needs it now is because it's going to protect it from the black wash later, as there's a good chance that would wash away the white and green with it. But before the wash, it needs glazing. This is just thin clear plastic sheet, which I cut into a strip, and then into rectangles, roughly the same size as Midlander's windows. They'll get sized up to the frame and trimmed close to size. The little glazing pieces are then dipped in glue and glaze and dropped down into place. It does help to push the glazing onto the model a bit to help the glue get a good grip. The roof can go on now, and you'll notice that the inside of it was painted the same as the cab interior. The outside was sprayed black with the frames. And yes, I actually planned ahead for once. With a dab of superglue on the aligning nips in the corners, the roof can be pushed down into place. I was surprised how many people asked about the black wash at Statfold, so I'll run over the important parts again here. As you can see, the black is getting applied neat, No thinning down at all. Like I mentioned before, the satin varnish will protect the paintwork below, so if you're not happy with what you've got, just wash it off and start again. The model's small, so I'll just go ahead and paint the whole thing in one go, including the interior. And as soon as I finish applying it, fresh water gets painted on to start the washing process. You can see how quickly I run over the model, as I'm going up against the black wash drying. It's personal taste where you go with the wash, but I've tried to keep it pooling in any recessed areas and details to give the model some visual weight. I also wanted to keep it pretty dirty on the buffers and the cab. Whilst it's drying, let's look at the figure. I didn't really have a plan for this guy, all I knew is that he needed a nice high-vis bib and hat on, so the skin is painted in my usual skin tones. I probably should have painted him in more classic engineering colours, but I ended up with brown trousers and a pale yellow polo shirt. He really looks like he's just rocked up and stuck a bib on for health and safety, which I like. The bib and hat really need to look the part, so received a few coats of bright orange to get the impact that I think it needed. The reflective strips were painted by hand, and I didn't film it because it was tough enough without the phone in the way, so this is how he looks. Oh blimey, he's getting a wash as well. Well, I guess that kind of makes sense. I'm going to assume that he's been working hard with, like, dirty things? I'm not really sure until I get the train behind him, but let's assume he's a mess because he's working on the railway in autumn weather. What a trooper. The black wash is applied in the same way as the loco. And in what looks like a foggy room for some reason, I'm not sure why, our man is glued onto the step. I've tried to get it so it looks like he's holding onto the controls, even if his hand isn't actually quite reaching. All done now, so the motor bogie can be screwed on. And yes, that was a hamster running across the workbench whilst I tried to screw in screws about 2 mil long. Why is my life like this? Well, there we go. Let's all say hi to the first loco in the engineering fleet for Nant Gwernel. And it is not going to be the last. It's not actually complete. Because, if you didn't notice, not only do I not yet have the worker nameplates, they are on order, but I also have a lack of ruston crests. Again, they're on order. I'll let you know when they're done. But for now, behold, Midlander. It's a distinct model, being so tiny small. But I think it'll pull its weight around Nant Gwernel when the time comes quite well. And actually, it's probably a brilliant one to start off if you're getting into the hobby. I didn't need any modifying to the body, and the chassis runs out the box. I'll try and let you know on the channel when this model is available from Westcliff Works if it's not already, because as you can see, he's a beauty. Top marks Westcliff once again. Righto, I'm off to catch that hamster. Cheers.